for giving me the opportunity. I'm going to start off just by saying I am a real estate broker. I am not an attorney and I am not an accountant. And the purpose of this is to talk about Proposition 19 as it affects seniors and as it affects real estate, because that's what I know about. And I hope that this will give you some questions and ideas that you're going to want to run to your trusted advisors to find out more information about how it relates specifically to you. So it's how Proposition 19 affects the seniors. These have given new options in what's going on, but also hopefully new opportunities for you. And we're also going to be talking about the remnants of COVID-19, because Proposition 19 and COVID-19 sort of all converged to create a real seismic shift in real estate. And the new normal in real estate has resulted, and it's not normal like you knew it before. So I will be covering all those things.
Okay, Nancy, could I interrupt for just a second? I forgot to mute everybody. So I'm going to mute everybody, and then Nancy, if you could just unmute yourself, that would be great.
Okay.
All right, go ahead. Oh, yeah, you have to unmute yourself though.
Okay. Okay, so I'm unmuted, I believe, right? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, great. So as I said at the beginning, I will repeat it. This is not deemed to be legal or accounting advice. This is just from a real estate perspective and how it specifically affects seniors and the real estate that they own. So what is Proposition 19? It is formally the Home Protection for Seniors, Severely Disabled Families, and Victims of Wildfire and Natural Disaster Act. That's a mouthful. It was passed by the voters November 2020, and it went into effect in two tranches, if you will. One of them went into effect February 16th, 2021, and the second portion, April 1st, 2021. So it is fully on board. So who should pay attention to this presentation? Any senior who owns a home, owns income property, plans to leave their property to heirs, and anyone who owns property in a living trust, and that's almost everybody in California. So why is this so important? Proposition has a potential for major disruptions in estate plans. Real estate is a major asset class in California. It has really been a part of people's estate plan to buy real estate to pass it on to their children. And as a result, because there's a lot of money involved, because we living in Southern California have had our assets in real estate go up in value exponentially. So where there's a lot of money, there's the potential for a lot of dispute. And COVID-19 has changed our thoughts for everyone, no matter what your age, of how you want to live and where you want to live. And so these changes to how we can leave real estate to our heirs or where we want to live is all rolled up into one big mess, if you will. So the effects of Proposition 19, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there's some of everything there. As I said, real estate centric plans are very big in California. Proposition 13 was passed in 1978, I believe. And the purpose of that was to allow people to keep real estate in the family. So parents and grandparents bought and held properties. They intended to have them to fund their retirement if it was an investment property, or even if they had their own home, they could rent it out and pass it on to the children that they could continue in that use too. The result is most estate plans in California, and Southern California especially, are very real estate heavy and cash poor. So Proposition 19, though, changes this model, and we're going to find out how. Two distinct types of transactions are affected by Proposition 19. One is the sale and replacement of a residence. Mom and dad live in a home and they sell the house and they buy a new one. That's during their lifetime. The second part of Proposition 19 has to do with the intergenerational transfer, which is mom and dad want to either gift during their lifetime or bequeath the house that they've lived in or other properties to their children for the purpose of keeping it in the family. So let's deal with the first one, and then the second one. And we're going to start with each of them by explaining what the old property rule was and then what the new one is. So Proposition 13 limited property tax to 1%, plus there was a local, usually of 0.25% on top of that, with a maximum of a 2-year increase yearly. And that was decided by the assessor's office. Proposition 60 allowed the transfer of the basis that they had in their real estate to any new primary residence for seniors 55 and older, disabled, or disaster victims. Both of the properties had to be the primary residence that they bought, that they sold and then bought, and it was only allowed to be done one time. This again was Proposition 60. And the home that they replaced it with had to be of equal or lesser value. And there was, if it was a couple years later, they added on an additional 5%. And this exemption was lost if the property that they bought was $1 more than the one they sold. And that, of course, made it difficult because of the time involved. There was a time frame of 3 years, so you could sell a property first and not buy a replacement property for 2 years. But it's difficult if you don't know what you're going to net when you sell a home, what you're going to get, and also then how do you buy something if you're not sure. So it was difficult to implement this proposition. Proposition 90 limited this only to certain counties. And the number of counties that participated could change because the counties voted on it on a regular basis. At one point, we had as many as 13 counties. At another time, we had as few as 7. So it was also difficult. So new Proposition 19 has changed these rules. Proposition 60 and 90 are totally gone. The basis of the current home for seniors 55 years and older can be transferred to a new property residence that they buy 3 times versus 1. So you could make a decision at 55 to move, and then again at 70, and maybe at 80, as where you wanted to live changed, and maybe the type of property that you wanted would also change. So that's a really good one. You can now move anywhere in California. It's not restricted to specific counties, and that's huge. There was a time during Proposition 6090 when you couldn't sell a residence in Los Angeles and move to Palm Springs because for that period of time, Riverside County was not participating. Then later they changed it and they decided to participate. So it was really a bouncing ball. So that's totally gone. You could go anywhere in the state. And it's no longer limited to the selling price. So if you sell a property in one area and then you have to move to a more expensive area, perhaps to be near to your children, you can buy a more expensive home. There is a caveat though. The tax base is carried over with the amount is what you have for what you sell it for, but anything over that is taxed at a full reassessment. So that's a combination of good and bad, but overall it's good because it gives the senior more options. And you now have to make that change within 2 years versus 3. So it's sort of a little bad. You still get 2 years to do it, but not a full 3. So what are the practical effects of these changes on seniors? Well, in my opinion, you have more freedom to move from a home that no longer suits your needs. Very often people are living in homes as they age that maybe for many reasons aren't right anymore. Maybe they have a second story on them. Maybe it's a large property that they have to take care of with a pool, and it's more of a liability than enjoyment. Maybe it's just in an area that has changed and they don't want to live there anymore. They want to get closer to their children or closer to a university or just a different place that they want to live. So more freedom is good. It allows the purchase of a replacement property anywhere in California in even a more expensive home. And this is huge because in the past, it was very difficult to move and be very limited by a specific price. So this also, though, calls into effect a reexamination of income producing properties because these are not at all exempted on a transfer. We'll get into that a little bit later. So let's look at some examples. One is the case of the same price new residence. So that means you have a home and you're going to replace it for the same price. So Ralph and Alice Crandon, some of you may remember them, bought their home in 1980 for $100,000. Those were the days, but in 1980, you could actually get a very nice home for $100,000. Due to the consumer price index adjustment that's yearly under Proposition 13, the assessed value in 2021 is $200,000. Now, that's not what it would sell for, but that's the assessed value. And that's what their real estate taxes are based on. They sell their home for the fair market value of $1,700,000 and purchase a new home for the same price. So under both the old law of Prop 13 and 6090 and Proposition 19, they retain the low basis of $200,000 and they pay approximately $2,500 a year in property tax. No change under Proposition 19. Now let's take a more expensive home. Ed and Trixie Norton bought their home in 1980 for $100,000. Under Proposition 13, the current assessed value is $200,000. They sell their home in 2021 for the fair market value of $1.7, and they purchase a replacement home for $2,200,000. Maybe they want a more expensive home. Maybe they just are moving to a more expensive area of California. Under the old law, they would totally forfeit their low basis for real estate taxes and pay property tax on the full $2.2 million purchase price, approximately $27,500 a year. Under Proposition 19, they continue to pay the same low property tax on the first $1,700,000, which is what they sold their house for, plus additional property tax on the next $500,000, which was the overage, for a total tax of about $8,750. That's almost $19,000 savings. So Proposition 19 can really be very, very useful on the sale and the replacement of your residence. So the good for seniors who were afraid to move because they would lose the low tax basis, now have more choices and options. They can move anywhere in California. They can buy any priced home without worrying about it, and they can then maybe buy first before they sell. They can move 3 times versus once. And I think this is huge because this is for seniors over the age of 55. And you may want something very different as you go through the aging process. And also, if you move to be closer to your children, sometimes your children get up and move, and then maybe you want to decide to move again. So I think that's a really positive part of this. So let's look again now at the other part of Proposition 19, which is the intergenerational transfers. First, we're going to look at the old property tax rules. So Proposition 58 allowed a transfer of a basis of the real estate taxes between parent and child. And you could do this by gift during your lifetime or at death. Proposition 193 extended this allowable transfer to grandparent and grandchild. The primary residence was fully exempted under this, regardless of value. So that meant that if somebody lived in a house on the west side and it was worth $15 million, they were still paying taxes, real estate taxes, at whatever value basis the parents had, their original basis plus any adjustments that had been made. This was huge. And up to 1 million of the assessed value, remember that's not the market value, but the assessed value of any other property exempted. So for instance, vacation homes, second homes, investment properties. So let's look at the new property rules. The basis of the primary residence given to children by gift or death is transferred only if it's used as a primary residence by one of the children. And this could be really ugly because maybe you want to give a property to a child who's living somewhere else. Let's face it, as people are living older, by the time they pass in their 90s, or I've had clients die in their hundreds, their children are probably in their 70s and they probably have their own home already. So unless one of the children is going to move in and mom or dad lived in that residence prior to their death or declared it as their principal residence, then that's not going to be able to be transferred. And it's also limited to a hybrid of the assessed value. So in our examples, that was 200,000 plus 1 million. So that's really the uglier. So that $15 million home that I was talking about, they're not going to be able to transfer all of that basis. There's no exemption at all for any other type of property. And that's really the ugliest part of this. So the effect of this is a major disruption to estate plans, meaning people had in mind, they had 6 properties, they had 3 children, they were going to give 2 of the properties to each of their children. And that was basically their estate plan. Well, it's going to shake out very differently to each of those children. So let's look at one of these cases. Smith and Jones own identical residences side by side. Each one has a fair market value of $2,500,000. Smith bought his home in 2012. And when he bought it, and with the assessed values, it's 1 million. Jones, his neighbor, bought in 1975 with an assessed value of 100,000. So that's a big difference, even though the houses are identical and they're right next to each other. Under the old law, their heirs, so after Smith and Jones passed, would retain the low carryover basis. So in that case, the person who owned the residence longer was passing on a greater benefit to his heirs. 100,000 versus 1 million. Under Proposition 19, both will pay a total of $18,750 in tax compared to their parents. So there's a difference there between $12,500 up to $18,750 and someone's parents who paid $125,000 that goes up to $18,750. Let's look at this on a chart to make it clearer. Again, these are intergenerational transfers. So the first one, the old assessed value was $1 million. The property tax was $12,500. The allowed market increase under Proposition 19 is $1 million. And that results in 0 increase in property tax. The excess over the fair market value is $500,000. That results in an increase in tax of $6,250. The new fair market value, which by the way is determined by the assessor, is $2,500,000. So the new property tax is going to be $18,750. And if we take away, for comparison, the $12,500 that they paid before, the dollar increase to the heirs is $6,250. So that's a 50% increase. That's a lot. But hold on, look at the next one. This again is the Jones heir. So the intergenerational transfer for them. The old assessed value, if we remember, was only $100,000 because they bought it a long time ago. Property tax that they were paying, the parents were paying, was $1,250 a year. The allowed market increase under Proposition 19 is $1 million, which results in 0 increase in property tax. The excess over the fair market value, which has been given by the assessor, is $1,400,000. That results in property tax increase of $17,500. So remember, the new fair market value is $2,500,000 for both of these properties. So the new property tax for the Jones heirs is $18,750. The old property tax was only $1,250. So the dollar increase is $17,500, or an increase of 1,400%. So under Proposition 19, people who've owned their homes for a very long time can't pass that benefit on, and the heirs get a percentage much higher increase to the tax. And it's going to make it very, very hard for the heirs who thought that they were going to be able to keep mom and dad's house with a very low real estate tax burden. They're in for a really big surprise. So what are the lessons that we can learn from this, or where you want to be thinking about it? The advantage of owning real property for intergenerational transfers has been significantly reduced by Proposition 19, especially for people who have owned their home for a very long time and have a low real estate tax basis. The one advantage remaining is a step up in basis for capital gains at death, but that's federal and not state, and Proposition 19 only has to do with the state. But currently there is debate about removing this tax advantage. It's being fought, but it's in discussion for the first time. There's also a debate about lowering the estate tax limit. Some of you may know that currently the estate tax limit per person is approximately $11.7 million. It was supposed to sunset in 2026, and it's now, bills are up that are being discussed to sunset it early and to drop it down to this, to the pre-estate tax limit, which could be $1 million or $3 million or $5 million, probably 5, but it's in discussion right now. So how can we learn again more about these intergenerational transfers? Up until this time, I've been talking about the primary residence, so the principal residence of the deceased and the heir who would inherit it. Any other inherited property under Prop 19 will be reassessed at the fair market value as determined by the assessor. There's absolutely no exception to that. The higher property taxes that will result, so if the kids still wanted to inherit the property and keep it as an income stream, which is what the parents had wanted them to do, obviously higher taxes will affect their bottom line. And so their income stream will be reduced over that which their parents had. And heirs inherit property at a higher depreciable basis now. So that's a good thing, because if their tax, where they start with their taxes, is higher, they'll be able to depreciate it again. So that's sort of a good thing. And there's a limited upside potential for rents right now based on the recent statewide rent control laws. And that's bad. We just had notification that LA County Board of Supervisors has just, in their wisdom, extended the COVID-19 tenant protections, which were supposed to sunset tomorrow, the 30th of September. And they have just now extended it yet again to January 31st, 2022. And a lot of landlords or people with rental properties were already working with attorneys trying to evict people who hadn't been paying rent. And so if you're in that situation, you might want to check with your landlord tenant attorney, because it just got extended literally, I think, this morning. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button for a second. Can you all hear me? Yes. So the bottom line on Proposition 19 is it effectively eliminates property tax benefits of the parent-child property transfers. So there are the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren in that picture. So it's advisable to talk to your estate planning attorney and perhaps revisit your estate plan based on these new changes. And you might want to reassess the competing interests of the principals during life and the heirs, and how you want to move forward with this. Again, I am not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. There are many, many wonderful estate planning attorneys who are swamped right now because of these changes, but don't let that deter you. Please think about getting in touch with your attorney and revisiting your estate plans. So planning opportunities to mitigate the effects of Prop 19 are now limited because there were two deadlines. One was February 16th, and the other one was April 1st, and they've passed, and Proposition 19 is in full force. So let's now talk about the remnants of COVID-19 as it affects real estate. So the threat of COVID is still real, as we all know. We have to wear masks. And so people were locked in their homes and they realized that they needed change. And this has affected everyone: seniors, young people, families who had the kids at home, people who are now working at home. And I just heard a statistic that nationwide, 58% of people have said that they're not going back to work in a regular work environment and they're going to stay working remotely. So this is here to stay. So looking at homes during COVID was challenging. In other words, changing your living situation because you realized you needed it was difficult. There were no open houses and there were limited showings. This has had pros and cons in that it has fast forwarded the real estate industry to get on board with tech, just as it has with shopping and everything else that affected us during COVID. And it's still here. So let's look at real estate now in the post-COVID world. We no longer require, if you were in real estate, you would have known we had to have all these fancy disclosures, persons entering advisory disclosure. Have you been sick? Have you been exposed? None of that is around anymore. No masks are required, supposedly, if you are vaccinated, but we as realtors in this area do require that people wear masks when they're inside properties. It's no longer required that the broker or the owner sanitize, which during COVID, we had to go and sanitize every doorknob and anything that was touched. It was very time consuming and challenging. So what happened though during COVID is technology came full force into real estate. And I want to make sure that you know what the technology is out there if you do decide that you want to make some changes. It really has changed how real estate is sold, and it is fast increasing the pace of real estate. And that may not be a bad thing, but it's something that you really have to get used to. Online exposure of properties before people come and look at them is absolutely paramount. We've had virtual tours before, but they're now really full force as pre-recorded video tours, and enter the interactive three-dimensional Matterport. I'm going to show you examples of both of these so you know what I'm talking about. Buyers gain access using technology. These are called Dollhouse floor plans, and they're part of a Matterport presentation. So you get these interactive so that they can see it from different angles, the virtual tours, and paramount for tenant occupied properties. Like I just said, now, if we have this COVID exclusion, tenants are refusing to let people in, even though an owner has the right to sell a property. And so we get around this with this technology. It's been very useful. I've been able to sell apartment buildings and income properties during COVID, believe it or not, with no showings until after we have an accepted offer. So here is an example of the pre-recorded video tour. What this is showing is we have a videographer who comes, and I, as the broker, decide what are the high points of the property. I walk through it and I can explain the property of what I think is best. I can point out the wonderful wood ceilings, all of these wonderful fixtures that are in the home, and I control it. You can stop it and go back, but you can't zoom in or do anything like that. So although buyers love these tours, especially when they were new to the market just a couple of short years ago, it is something that the broker, we are in control of. Enter the 3D Matterport. Something brand new that came out during COVID. This is a special camera that allows 360-degree turns. It puts it 3D, and the buyers have the control on their computer and mouse to zoom in. You'll notice there are little white circles around. They touch each circle and go from room to room, and they can zoom in to any corner. If they think they see a crack in the wall, they can zoom into it. So the person viewing controls what they're looking at, and they can really find out a lot about a property. So what is the new normal in real estate? It's a nervous market. There have been frequent changes in fair market value, changes to local ordinances. Many of you may have heard of the accessory dwelling units known as ADUs. Basically, in January of 2020, we came into law that any property can have an accessory dwelling unit as long as the owner lives on the property and they can rent it out. This effectively removed single-family zoning in all of Los Angeles and actually all of the state. So how have the buyers changed? The effects of COVID have been fast and furious. They've been stuck in their homes and they realize they need something different. They want it now, and they want the property done. There were great shortages in materials and workers during COVID. And so people are hesitant to buy those fix-up properties if it's what they need for their living situation. And let's face it, money is really cheap. For a lot of these buyers, it's just a number. What's my payment going to be? And not the actual selling price of the property that they're buying. It's very different than how we used to think about real estate 30 years ago. And the millennial effect has really had a strong impact on the market. And I'll give you my little millennial story to explain it. I, who definitely am not a millennial, go shopping and we go to Whole Foods with a millennial. And we both want to buy the same article and we find it in Whole Foods. I hadn't known what it looked like. And I said, oh, I just saw that in Vons yesterday. Well, in Whole Foods, it's $5. But I tell the millennial, we can just go down the street to Vons and we can get it for $3.50. The millennial says, no, I want it now. I don't care what it costs. That is what is happening to the real estate market. So the real estate market right now is speaking, and the buyers are speaking to us. The demand is high, prices are high, multiple offers are definitely the norm. And what buyers are looking for? Large yards, because if they have to be stuck in their home, they want to be able to go out and enjoy a yard. They want a pool. The community pools have been closed. And even now they've just decided a pool, which used to be, if you wanted it, yes. If you didn't want it, no. Pools can now add as much as $200,000 to the value of a home with a large lot. They want the possibility of being able to build an accessory dwelling unit so that if they're buying a more expensive property, they can either have income from that, or if they have their office there, they can write it off as a business expense. And traditional floor plans, which had been really out of style for the last couple of years, are way in style. Why? Because if people have to work from home, you can't do it with those big open spaces and high ceilings because the sound reverberates and you can't have conversations when both of you need to work and the kids need to do their homework. So traditional floor plans with rooms where they can close the doors are now back in style. And that's good for seniors because most of us have those more traditional floor plans. And multifamilies are really also very sought after because they see that they can expand them and therefore get different kinds of income and different kinds of tenant. But that is a very complicated and totally different presentation dealing with multiple families and income properties. So in COVID, you might say, well, what am I going to do? Should I repair a property? So let's look at a couple of examples. You have to be able to justify the repairs or staging, which was very popular before, but is not used as much during the current environment. How much is enough to do? Enough to make it attractive to the type of buyer that's out there now. And you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. You only want to spend $1 if you're going to get $3 back. So what do you have to do to appeal to these days buyers? Well, decluttering is basic. Now, your living room may not look like this, but picture speaks 1,000 words. So obviously clean it up. A lot of us have furniture in all different places. And if you can just pull it together and paint the house, it looks bright and happy and no curtains. People love bright. Now, I don't want to say that this is how you look, but unfortunately, a lot of the seniors who've been in their home for a very long time who are not properly cared for, we have to clean it up. And this was just cleaned, if you can believe it, between the first picture and the second. Too much furniture. A lot of us, we just kind of gather stuff and there's some beautiful pieces here, but there's just too many of it. And this room, which is a good sized room, you just couldn't really see what it was. So we move things around, take off the heavy drapes, take out one, just leave. There were 3 couches and chairs in here, and we make the home look inviting. It's the exact same furniture that was there, but now it looks like a big room. There's light and there's space. A kitchen, well, kitchens are the most important room in the house, and we use them as we see here. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out and hire somebody and put in a whole new kitchen. A lot of us have countertops that are worn or chipped, or they've been glazed and it's coming off. Counters can be reglazed and they can look like this for less than $1,000. A lot of the cabinets in older kitchens are solid wood, or they're good quality cabinets, but they're dirty and they just need to be refreshed. Think about painting them. And that old kitchen that I showed you just 2 slides back, this is what we turned it into. We did this for a very minimal amount of money, painting cabinets and reglazing the counters. Quite an improvement, don't you think? So other things that seniors often have in their homes are carpets, and very often they're very old and stained. They were good quality. But look carefully at this picture. I'm not changing the furniture. I'm just raising the blinds and removing the carpet. And look what happens. This now becomes a light and bright and happy space where before it looked cramped and dirty. Show those wood floors, they really sell a home. This is another kitchen example. We didn't do anything to the kitchen except make it light and bright. It was very dark, it had drop ceilings, and it looked like a morgue. We added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, what we call recessed lights or hi-hats, and the kitchen became bright and a happy place, made a huge difference for less than $1,000. So we're at an inflection point in real estate that's really been caused by everything, COVID-19, Proposition 19, and just how things are. So the impact on new laws on real estate ownership. Know the implications and as they apply to you and your situation. Reevaluate the ownership that you have in real estate and your estate planning options. Do they really, under the new laws, suit what you wanted to accomplish? And there are new challenges and new opportunities, but I hope that you will embrace them. And I hope that learning a little bit about this from, again, a non-lawyer and non-accountant point of view has maybe opened up your mind to some new opportunities. I would now welcome any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is Betty Ann. So I should have caught this, but I didn't quite understand it. If you leave your house to your kids and they're going to live in it, do they get the tax advantage?
They get your assessed value. So that's, say, in 200 in my example, plus $1 million. So if the assessor comes in after you're gone and says your house is worth $2 million, they only can take your 200 plus $1 million, and they will be taxed at the higher rate for everything over that. And that was to eliminate people with very, very expensive homes. I mentioned on the West Side, where under the old law, they could transfer a $15 million home to their kids, and the kids would be paying real estate taxes as if they still had that low basis of a couple $100,000.
Okay.
And that was to equalize that. So
Yeah.
it depends what your house is worth.
Oh, but is the million going to rise, or it just stuck at $1 million?
I can't say what they may do to amend the proposition, but right now it is your assessed value. And I hope you all know how to find your assessed value. You get your tax bill every year, and your assessed value is on your tax bill. So that's what it is, and it can go up every year. So you want to check that every year, and then you add $1 million to that. And that's what you could pass on to your children, assuming that it was your principal residence before you pass, and that the child is going to move in and actually have that as their principal residence. And they have to declare homestead there. So they can't just say they're going to live there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Just unmute yourself and speak up.
Well, I just have please.
Question. Sorry, we came in, we were away and didn't hear the first 10, 15 minutes of this. Excellent presentation.
Really nice.
Thank you. Is there a possibility to get a copy of those slides, or will we be able to review it again through the website, or how does that work? Since
Yeah,
we,
this is
Oh,
being
that was-
recorded.
okay,
Good, Wayne.
Yeah, so you can, I think that what Wayne has said, that he can share it only with people who've been on this. It's not for public dissemination.
understand.
I would like to give this, if you know any other groups, and I would like to give it to other people to kind of help them understand it.
Yeah, and you are with, what real estate group are you with?
I'm with DZ Penner Podley.
Okay,
So,
Daisy.
yeah,
Okay.
DZ Penner Podley, Bill Podley. I was with Podley Properties before that, and then Dixon. We've made. I stay with the same place. They just
Yeah,
changed
that's
it.
right. We know, we're familiar. Thank you.
And I've been a broker for 30 years.
Yeah.
So
Let me step in and say, I can see that there's going to be a lot of interest in seeing this repeat of the video. I mean, at least to me, I'm going to look at it myself once
Yeah.
more. But my point is, I want to get it onto our cloud and available to you. So watch in the events part of the website, and then beneath that, the Zoom recordings. That should appear within a day or two, and you can see it all again.
Okay, that's great. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Dave.
and
I
if you have any questions, even after this is over, I'm sorry, you're welcome to call me or email me and stuff like that. I live right now to Dina.
Okay, I have one more question. If you own property in another state, will California laws apply?
No, this is the Proposition 19 only is a state law. It is for a property owned in California.
Okay.
However, if you have income properties, and again, I'm not an attorney, but if you did a 1031 exchange in order to buy a property in another state, there is a recording, an accounting, tax return requirement, as long as you still own that property. So I don't know what your situation was, but you might want to look into that or ask your accountant.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? There were little parts of it that were a little obscure to me.
I tried to simplify. It's a very complicated
It was
area.
actually, yeah, I actually understood most of it. But you might want to explain what the basis means.
Your basis is your assessed value. So when you buy a house, that's your